Good evening again. The Dunedin Anglican Synod met today to begin the process of selecting a new bishop. Bishop Peter Mann is to retire in February, and the election of a successor has attracted nationwide attention because of speculation it could be a woman. Alan Brady has the story.
The path to the post of spiritual leader of Anglicans in Otago and Southland is a complex one. Meetings throughout the diocese have discussed the type of person church members feel is needed to lead them into the 21st century. This weekend's synod meeting at All Saints Church will narrow down the field to one nomination. That name will then be put to the other dioceses and bishops for approval. It could be a New Zealander or it could be someone from overseas. And there's some speculation in the church that the time is right for New Zealand Anglicans to elect their first woman bishop.
I think finally the synod will have to decide not in terms of just for the sake of gender, but more in terms of is this the right person at the right time to perform the task of bishop.
The Church of England's only just agreed in principle to the ordination of women priests, something New Zealand's had for 12 years. And only one country, the United States, has elected a woman bishop.
The experience of women within the ordained ministry has been positive for the Church in New Zealand. And so I think we're at the right stage. A lot depends on each individual synod as it meets to decide on the future.
It's likely to be some time before the name of the new Bishop of Dunedin is announced.
The steady hands and surgical skills of a small team of workers in Invercargill look like becoming a big export earner. They're grabbing a slice of the exclusive smoked salmon market with a new technique, and as John McDermott reports, it's attracting a lot of European interest.
With smoked salmon so expensive, the onus has always been on the hotel or restaurant chef to slice it as thinly as possible. Thanks to a New Zealand company's ingenuity, the smoked salmon from this season's Stewart Island harvest will reach the kitchen already wafer thin, but it won't have been frozen and machine sliced. The key is the secret preparation and native timber cold smoking process used by Invercargill's Regal company. It gets the soft salmon flesh to a state where each bone can be individually removed, then sliced.
Well, you have to have a good steady hand, that's for sure. No, it's just mainly your concentration is really not to try and cut yourself, the one, and try and control the slicing. So that's an even slice and it's thin.
The more slices, the further it goes, and that, along with the flavour and the way the salmon fillet is delicately reconstituted, with each slice separated by plastic wrap, is already appealing to European buyers. With the Invercargill company hoping for a first-year $3 million slice of the smoked salmon market, this rare skill looks like being increasingly in demand.
Solo, the country's most famous penguin, is solo no more. After a rocky start, he's made it to his first birthday. Now, Alan Baddock reports, it looks as though the plucky penguins picked up a mate along the way.
Solo's the yellow-eyed penguin that first gained national stardom when he turned up as a weak and hungry chick in Wellington earlier this year. He was evacuated to a penguin colony on Banks Peninsula, but proved he had other ideas. Within 3 weeks, he'd abandoned it and swum 400 kilometres back to Wellington. The pampered life of a zoo, it seemed, suited him much better. In a bid to persuade the persistent paddler that he should grow up as a penguin and not a pet, wildlife officers flew him south again to another yellow-eye colony, this time in North Otago. And after much subtle persuasion, it seems Solo has decided this time he'll stay.
We had him at home for 3 weeks and building him up from 4 kilos to 5.5. And then when he came down to the bay, he wouldn't go to sea, and Bob had to put him in the water each morning, and he would go out and have a wonderful salt water bath, and 20 minutes later he'd be back for his food. So we done that for 3 weeks and then started to wean him off from food, and in less than a week he went out with the other birds and came in each night, would come up for a cuddle and say hi, and away he'd go. And from then on he's just associated with the other birds, and he's perfectly normal.
So normal that on the eve of his first birthday, Solo returned from a seaborne sojourn with a companion. She's a relative newcomer to the colony, and apparently she and Solo have become at least good friends. But only time will tell if this is the real thing or just another teenage romance.
Sweet probably picked her up on that blind date television program. The Grand Traverse of the South Island's high country will wind up tomorrow. More than 150 competitors have covered the 400-kilometre course, which took them through some of the toughest terrain in New Zealand. Mike Lynch looks back on a challenging week.
A little over a week ago, more than 100 well-appointed Europeans made ready for a South Island jaunt. But French adventurer Gerard Fouzy had some surprises in store. The locals couldn't quite make the whole thing out.
Don't you think it's a little bit crazy, no?
Oh, of course. Anybody that would do that would have to be bloody stupid in my eyes.
It started out as idyllic. Up the Hopkins Valley, heading for the Broderick Pass, and over the divide into the Landsborough. The organiser is ever present, cajoling, advising. For progress on the trek is being beamed to Europe by satellite, and big money's involved. But already the 3 New Zealand teams are pulling well ahead. They're on this trek for the money, just the holiday.
It's not a good place to be if you're regretting being here.
And for the Europeans, the Landsborough, which has taken lives in the past, is where the troubles start. Racing driver Patrick Tombe has his problems too. One of his team has gone over a bluff in the night. He ends up in hospital with a crushed vertebrae after walking 5 hours to get help. Down the river and onto Wanaka, the New Zealanders' sheer pace is starting to amaze the French.
Is it possible for you to be tied just one time?
No.
Yeah. Tomorrow.
Yeah, and the next day.
The locals manage the horse leg well. Not so all the visitors. But generally, the natives are friendly.
All right.
Oh, no, it's fantastic.
The leaders get over the Cascade Saddle and down the Dart with no trouble. But 3 days later, the river's a vastly different story. But even if they're miles behind, it's a matter of honour to stay in this race. And for the last leg, from Te Anau, the heavens really open. The Kiwis are finished, but the rivers are getting even higher, and it's real Boy Scout stuff getting the teams through. There's a wet beauty here. And a magnificent despair. For the record, the Swiss were the first visitors home yesterday, and the first of the French came in today.
Have a nice weekend. We'll see you again Monday. Good night.